You've done everything you can to prepare. You researched, planned, double checked, and still it doesn't feel like enough. What if the problem isn't that you're underprepared, but that your subconscious has been trying to protect you all along? Welcome to Breakthrough Weekly. I'm your host, Monica Palayo. Every week, we go beneath the surface of what's keeping you stuck, not to the symptoms, but to where it actually started. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, thank you for being back. Today's episode is titled The Difference Between Preparation and Overpreparation. Let's begin. Most high performers believe they prepare to improve their success. Few realize they may actually be preparing to avoid failure. For most of my 21-year career at Intel, I lived by one simple rule: let my work speak for itself. I've always been a quiet person. I believe humility meant showing up, doing exceptional work, and allowing the results to speak louder than I ever could. Talking about my strengths felt uncomfortable, and describing my accomplishments often felt like I was bragging. If someone asked me what I was good at, I generally struggled to answer. Instead, I poured that energy into my work because I wanted the people to experience what I was capable of rather than hearing me talk about it. Looking back, that approach shaped my career in ways I never expected. People reached out to me about opportunities, leaders recommended me for new roles. I was invited to projects and positions I never had to pursue because people had experienced my work firsthand. Over time, I built a reputation for being dependable, adaptable, and consistently delivering. That reputation eventually opened the door to supporting Intel's CEO office, one of the most rewarding and demanding roles of my career. It was also one of the best teams I've ever had the privilege of working with. Every single person on that team was exceptional. We trusted one another, challenged each other, solved incredibly complex problems together, and celebrated our success together. Over time, we became much more than coworkers. We became a family. What made the team so special wasn't just the talent each other brought to the table, it was the mindset we shared. Whatever the CEO's objective was, our responsibility was to make it happen. Once the objective was clear, each of us went to work on the responsibilities we owned. We did our own diligence, researched what we needed, and kept the team updated as the itinerary continued to evolve. Most of the time, the work simply moved forward. When one of us encountered a logistical constraint or a challenge that affected another part of the trip, we worked through it together. Everyone brought a different perspective, and those conversations often led us to solutions that one person alone might not have considered. If we couldn't resolve it as a team or the situation required a business decision or compromise, we elevated to the chief of staff with information, options, and trade offs we have uncovered. That was simply how we worked. Everyone owned a different part of the planning process, trusted each other to execute, and understood that our individual work contributed to a much larger objective. Looking back, I can also see how the same commitment to excellence shaped the way we approach uncertainty. When business priorities change quickly, our instinct was to preserve as many opportunities as possible because we generally wanted to give the business every viable option. We operated in an environment where priorities could change quickly and expectations were exceptionally high. Every trip was built around a business objective, whether that involved meeting with government officials, customers, analysts, internal leadership meetings, speaking at a conference, or often a combination of several engagements within the same itinerary. As priorities evolved, our responsibility was to adapt while keeping the CEO moving seamlessly from one engagement to the next. Early on, one of the ways we created flexibility was by keeping multiple options alive while business decisions were still evolving. From the logistics side, that sometimes meant maintaining more than one version of an itinerary. We booked different flight options, held hotel reservations in multiple locations, and worked through several logistics scenarios because we didn't yet know which direction the business would ultimately take. Until the business direction was confirmed, we often had to keep multiple itineraries moving simultaneously. As the logistical lead, my responsibility wasn't deciding which business opportunity the CEO should pursue. My role was to understand what each option required from an operational standpoint and identify the constraints that could eventually affect our flexibility. If we were considering multiple countries, I still needed to understand the logistical realities behind each option. Did a country require a visa? Were there airport restrictions? Would hotel availability become a challenge? Were there deadlines that would eventually eliminate one of our options? Those were questions I asked on every trip. The difference was that when we were actively exploring multiple directions, those logistical constraints helped establish the decision points. They allowed the team to understand when our flexibility would begin to narrow and by when we needed to make a decision before those constraints started driving the itinerary instead of us. Experience gradually changed the way I approached uncertainty. Early on, if two business objectives were still being considered, we often continued building both itineraries at the same time. Most of the time, there was a preferred business objective we were working towards, but it depended on factors that we were still outside of our control. Until those pieces came together, we also needed a second option that allowed the trip to move forward if the preferred objective couldn't be confirmed. As our experience grew, so did our confidence. We understood our capabilities, trusted one another, and knew we could pivot quickly when circumstances changed. That confidence changed how we approach our planning. One trip stands out to me. As we began planning an international trip through Asia, most of the itinerary was already taking shape. The uncertainty centered around one portion of the trip where the team was exploring different countries while a business objective continued to evolve. One of those countries required a visa, so one of the first things I did was research the requirements, processing times, and everything needed to understand the logistical constraints we would eventually face. Identifying logistical constraints early was simply part of how I approached every trip. Once I understood those constraints, I brought them back to the team and explained that if we wanted to keep that country as an option, we needed a decision by a specific date. Beyond that point, the visa process would begin reducing our flexibility. That conversation changed the way I thought about preparation. The questions I asked never changed. What changed was how we used the answers. Instead of keeping every possible option fully active, we started using those constraints to establish decision points. That allowed us to focus our planning where it created the greatest value while preserving our ability to pivot if circumstances change. Looking back, we didn't become less prepared. We became more intentional. While I was still working in the CEO office, I became certified as a hypnotherapist, studying the subconscious mind and the neuroscience behind our behaviors. That work had a profound impact on me. It helped me become more confident, speak up more often, and trust my judgment in ways I hadn't before. By then, I had mastered my role in CEO travel logistics. What studying the subconscious mind and my own rooted belief system gave me wasn't a better understanding of the work itself. It helped me understand what had been driving many of my own behaviors all along. As I continued growing personally and professionally, my understanding continued to deepen. Looking back at my years in executive operations, I began recognizing another layer of my own patterns that I hadn't fully appreciated while I was living them. At the time, I generally believed I was simply being diligent. I wanted to be prepared, do a great job, and reduce the chances of making a mistake. Today, I understand that many of those behaviors were driven by subconscious beliefs I wasn't yet aware of. My subconscious wasn't trying to improve my performance, it was trying to protect me from the meaning I had attached to making a mistake. Beneath that drive to prepare was a rooted belief about what getting it wrong would say about me. And my subconscious responded the only way it knew how, by encouraging behaviors that I believe would keep me safe. Preparation and over preparation can look almost identical on the surface. The difference isn't the behavior itself, it's what's driving the behavior. Think about it this way. Imagine you've gathered the information you need, researched the options, and have enough information to make a sound decision and take appropriate action. Yet something inside you says, let me check one more thing. You keep another option open, research one more possibility, hold on to a backup plan, or delay the decision because you still don't quite feel ready. Or maybe you've experienced something similar to what I did earlier in my career. After a conference room ended up being too small for a meeting, I found myself occasionally reserving a larger room or even holding a second room just in case. It felt responsible because I was trying to prevent the same problem from happening again. But the same pattern can show up almost in every area of our lives. It might look like delaying a job application because you think you need more experience, continuing to pursue more knowledge or certifications before taking the next step, overanalyzing every conversation before speaking up, or postponing an important decision because you still don't feel quite ready. The circumstances may be different, but the pattern is often the same, continuing to prepare even though you already have enough information to move forward. On the surface, both examples look like preparation. The question is whether the additional effort is improving the quality of the decision or simply helping you feel more certain about before making it. Preparation has a purpose. It helps us gather the information we need, understand the constraints, evaluate our options, and make informed decisions. Once that purpose has been fulfilled, preparation has done its job. Over preparation begins when we already have the information needed to move forward, but part of us continues searching for more because getting it wrong feels emotionally unsafe. Consciously, we believe we're simply being thorough. Beneath the surface, however, our subconscious is asking a very different question. What else can I do to reduce the chances of getting this wrong? That question doesn't come from the task itself, it comes from the meaning we've attached to making a mistake. If getting it wrong means I'm not good enough, if disappointing someone means I've failed, if making a mistake threatens how I see myself, then no amount of additional preparation will ever feel like enough because the subconscious isn't searching for more information, it's searching for certainty. The challenge is that certainty doesn't exist. There will always be another possibility to consider, another variable you can't control, or another backup plan you can create. Throughout my career, we continuously refined our process by documenting lessons learned, creating playbooks, and establishing clear standards for how we planned and executed our CEO travel. Those resources gave everyone involved a shared understanding of our expectations, best practices, and the level of excellence we were striving to deliver. Our confidence, however, came from doing the work. Every trip, every challenge, every unexpected change strengthened our ability to adapt, making it easier to trust ourselves when the next one came along. Preparation reaches a point where it has done its job. Beyond that point, continuing to gather more information no longer improves your readiness to act. Confidence isn't built by preparing more to eliminate uncertainty, it's built by repeatedly taking action, adapting when circumstances change, and realizing you're capable of handling far more than you once believed. If this resonated with you, I encourage you to pause and ask yourself one question. Have I reached a point where I have enough information to move forward, Or am I continuing to prepare because getting it wrong feels too risky? For years, I believed I was simply being thorough. What I eventually discovered was that my behaviors weren't being driven solely by the situation in front of me. They were also being influenced by subconscious beliefs that had been shaping my decisions for much longer than I realized. What changed my life wasn't learning how to prepare better, it was understanding why I felt I needed to. That's the work I do with my clients today. One of the things I hear most often after we uncover the rooted belief is everything finally makes sense. Once people understand the rooted belief driving their behaviors, they stop seeing themselves as broken, lazy, or lacking discipline. Instead, they begin to understand why those patterns develop in the first place and why they've been difficult to change. From there, real transformation becomes possible. Clients begin trusting themselves instead of constantly second guessing every decision. They stop carrying the pressure of having to get everything right. They learn to prepare without over preparing, set healthier boundaries without guilt, and move forward with greater confidence because they're no longer trying to protect an identity that no longer reflects who they are. If this article resonated with you and you will like to explore whether this approach is right for you, I invite you to schedule an exploratory call. We'll talk about what you're experiencing, the changes you like to create, and determine whether this work is the right fit for your goals and circumstances. Explore what's possible at www.thethrivingpathways.com. If you enjoyed this article, subscribe. If something in this episode felt familiar, not just as a story, but as a pattern you recognize in your own life, that recognition matters. The subconscious doesn't surface what it isn't ready to be seen. If it came up, it's worth paying attention to. Thank you for spending this time with me. If someone came to mind while you were listening, that's not a coincidence. Share this episode with them. If you're enjoying Breakthrough Weekly, I truly appreciate if you follow the show and leave a review. Helps more people discover these conversations and allows this message to reach those who may need it most. New episodes drop every Monday, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. I'm Monica Pelayo, and I'll see you next time.